am Uhtred, son of Uhtred. Just kidding. Hi friends, today I am going to be doing my book review and an analysis between the show and the first book of The Last Kingdom, first book of the Saxon Chronicles. Let's jump in. The Saxon Chronicles were written by Bernard Cornwell. He is a very prolific author, and while I normally read fantasy and review fantasy, this is historical fiction. I tend to like historical fiction, just I think a tier less than fantasy. Sometimes it can really pull me in. Other times I have a hard time kind of getting my feet wet with the story. I was pulled to this particular book because of the fact that I have binged watched The Last Kingdom probably 10 times. We saw the preview for this show years and years ago when it was originally airing on BBC, and we thought, wow, that is a really terrible trailer. And it was a really terrible trailer. But the first season of that show ended up being one of the best historical fiction adaptations or shows in general that I feel that I had ever seen. It aired at a similar time period to when Vikings was airing, and while I initially liked Vikings, in my opinion, this show just blew it out of the water. The story takes place, both the book and the show. I'm going to go back to talking about the book now primarily, and I'm going to be talking about spoilers. So if this is not something that you want to be spoiled for, I suggest you stop watching. If you've watched the Netflix show, it might be a different narrative for you, but it's not going to be too different, and it won't be that much of a surprise. So we're going to jump into our discussion fully now. This story takes place anyway, in the 800s in what will become England. There are 4 kingdoms at this point. They are called Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex. The reason it is called the Last Kingdom is that Wessex is the last standing kingdom that has not been taken over by the Danes. Now, I am not going to refer to people as Vikings in this review because Vikings are not actually a people. It is more of an act like pillaging. That is Viking. What the people are in this story especially is Danes and Northmen, and going forward from this point I am going to refer to them as Danes, as that is how they refer to them in the book and in the show. Our protagonist in both the book and the show, but I'm going to talk about the book for now on just for a little bit, is Uhtred, and he is actually born as Osbert. Osbert is a son of an alderman, aka a son of a lord, that lives in Bebbanburg, which is a factual place. Bebbanburg did exist. The castle is still there, or a castle is still there, and it is located in Northumbria. He is a son of a long line of people named Uhtred, and the way that that works is that the firstborn son and heir is always named Uhtred and is referred to as Uhtred, son of Uhtred. It's very clear. He is in a very well-fortified castle, but they're on the coast, and our book begins with the arrival of the Danes on their shore. His father sends a foolish group of them out. One of those people includes his elder brother named Uhtred. His brother is slain. Because there is no longer an Uhtred, son of Uhtred, there has to be an Uhtred, son of Uhtred, so Osbert is rebaptized as Uhtred, son of Uhtred, and going forward, this is going to be his name for the rest of the series. He is sometimes referred to as Uhtred, son of Uhtred, Uhtred of Bebbanburg, Uhtred Ragnarsson. There's a few different names, but we'll get to those too. Uhtred is telling this story from the perspective of someone that has lived their lives. You can sense from the narrative that he is an older man, he has fought many battles, he is an experienced person, and he is retelling his life. When the book begins, he is a young boy, and this is an interesting time in what will become England's history. England itself as a nation does not exist under the one Christian God. There are the 4 kingdoms, like I said, and Danes and Anglo-Saxons are consistently at war with one another because of religion, but mostly because Danes wish to settle in what will become England because the land is much more fertile and can lead to longer, happier lives where they can be complacent farmers and just live peacefully without having to consistently go and raid. There are 2 stories that kind of take place within this first book. We have the perspective of the Danes and that storyline, and then we have the perspective of the Anglo-Saxons. From the perspective of the Danes, we meet a few new characters, which are Ragnar the Fearless, who adopts Uhtred. We have his son, Ragnar. We have his daughter, Tura. We have his father, Ravin. And we have kind of our antagonists of the Danes, who are Kjartan, his son Sven, Ubba, Ivar, and another brother. On the side of the Anglo-Saxons, we have Leofric, we have Elswith, and we have Alfred, who are our main people, as well as Ethelred. I think he deserves an honorable mention, even though he isn't as important in this book as I assume he is going forward. First, we have Father Beaka, who is priest to Uhtred and is just an incredible character throughout most of the story, but we'll get to him too. The story really begins to take place when there is a battle that is fought between Uhtred's father and Ragnar the Fearless. Uhtred's father loses. Uhtred is taken as a prisoner and is initially thought he is going to be ransomed, but he is liked so much by Ragnar the Fearless that he is adopted by them and he is raised as a Dane. This kind of creates an identity crisis for him in the sense that he was raised as an Anglo-Saxon Christian and he is now being raised by a pagan Danish family, and he loves his new family. He fits in better with them than he ever did with his father. His father was not a kind or loving man, and he has a well-established life in this scenario. Where things get a little bit complicated is that Kjartan is an oarsman for Ragnar the Fearless, and his son Sven is a troublesome jerk. Sven has a coveted interest in Tura, daughter of Ragnar the Fearless, and at one point when they are playing in the woods, he strips her half naked and looks at her. The result of this is that Ragnar takes one of Sven's eyes for looking at half of her naked body and banishes Kjartan from his land. Throughout the book, Kjartan tries to make amends with Ragnar several times and is unable to do so. Ragnar continues to refuse him, and eventually we kind of get the idea that that is not going to reconcile. Now, this is where I'm going to start to talk a little bit between the differences between the show and the book, because I thought this was really interesting. The show does a phenomenal job in that the first episode, I'd say probably half of the episode is dedicated to the perspective of young Uhtred, but then it jumps ahead to Uhtred being older, and that's an important jump. However, the first book is probably the first 4 episodes of the first season of The Last Kingdom, and for the majority of the book, it's actually from the perspective of younger Uhtred. We get a much deeper relationship between him and Ragnar the Fearless. He goes raiding with them. It was a really interesting perspective to see why this relationship was so important to Uhtred, and it was because he had all these years to formulate that bond with his adopted father that was really skipped over in the show. Big part of the raiding that takes place in the book is with these brothers. We have the brother Ubba and Ivar, and then they have a third brother whose name I'm forgetting right now. I thought was interesting was that in the show, they wrapped up all of the brother characters into Ubba, even though they mentioned that Ubba has a brother that dies in Ireland. In the book, this is Ivar the Boneless, and I believe historically this was accurate in that Ivar did die in Ireland, or as they like to say in the show, Ireland. We also have Guthrum, who is one of the main Dane antagonists. He's an interesting character in the book. They portrayed him quite differently in the show. I very much preferred the characterization of him in the show, but both were well done. Now, both in the book and in the show, but it was more understood why this might have happened in the book, is that there becomes a blood feud between Kjartan, Sven, and Ragnar the Fearless's family. Uhtred at this point is aged up, as is Tura, as is Sven, and Tura is about to be married, and in Danish tradition, you would have a feast in your hall for the wedding. Night of the wedding feast, or the night before the wedding feast, Kjartan leads a raiding party and sets the hall ablaze. Tura is captured and is given to Sven as basically a prize, and the only people to survive this are Uhtred, Tura, and Uhtred's friend Brida, who was also semi-adopted, more brought on as a worker for Ragnar the Fearless. In the show, this compels Uhtred to jump ahead and want to go and reclaim Bebbanburg right away. And in the show, he very much struggles with his identity as to whether or not he is now Dane or he is Anglo-Saxon. Brida is very much convinced that they are Danes. She wants to live the life of a Dane. She does not want to live the life of an Anglo-Saxon woman. And Uhtred, in very many ways, has taken on the persona of a Dane. He is no longer Anglo-Saxon. He is pagan. He does not believe in the Christian God. In the book, I found it very interesting that he actually decides that once Ragnar has died, that he has no more ties to the Danes, and he has to revert back to being an Anglo-Saxon, despite the fact that he's not a Christian and he still believes in the Norse gods, etc. Both of these mediums were done so brilliantly. A lot of the events happen similar but not the same. Bubba is killed by Uhtred. It doesn't happen in the same way, but I think it's an interesting comparison to deep dive into the books. Leofric is with Uhtred on a boat, not on land. There's a lot of different things that come into play, but all in all, it's a good read. I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed comparing the book to the show. If you like stuff like this, you can leave me a comment below. Let me know if you've watched The Last Kingdom or read the book. I'm curious to see how the rest of the series goes. The next movie or final installment of Uhtred's story is going to premiere next month on Netflix, so I'm excited to see that. If you would like to help me, you can like and subscribe, and if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at FantasyAwash, and I will see you next time.